Hello, good morning, good evening. Welcome to the FinTech Innovation Summit, the future of the financial services industry. I'm Yonit Serkin. I'm the Managing Director of MassChallenge Israel, and I'm thrilled to be here to welcome you all for the third installment of this very important conversation. We're more than a quarter into dealing with COVID, and this Innovation Summit series has asked the questions about how changes to our daily behaviors and preferences, global uncertainty, and the international health crisis, which all of our economies are grappling with, has already and will continue to affect growth across a series of industries. We began this series looking at the health sector and understanding how hospitals, providers, and entrepreneurs are approaching the opportunities and challenges presented by these dynamics. Next, we spoke to cyber experts and tech leaders who are enabling a reimagined, flexible, and different workplace than any of us could have imagined before. Today, we'll be talking to leaders of finance and commerce and exploring the ways changes to our preferences, behaviors, and frankly, uncertainty has affected both the financial and capital markets, but also created new opportunities for FinTech solutions to take hold and grow in ways that were totally unforeseen just a few months ago. We're bringing together today a series of conversations between thought leaders, enterprises, investors, startups, and entrepreneurs who are all not only grappling with a future that is uncertain and full of question marks, but also creating those new realities that will ultimately be opportunities for us all. I'm thrilled to convene this session in close partnership with my friend and colleague, Devin Sherman, who leads our MassChallenge FinTech program, creating curated solutions and opportunities to connect with enterprises in the FinTech space. We're going to hear more from Devin later today. But with no further ado, I'd like to kick us off and invite a conversation to explore how FinTech solutions and FinTech startups are actually growing and approaching growth during this COVID-19 crisis. I'm going to invite up our friend, Chuck Svirk from MassMutual Ventures. Chuck is a principal working with entrepreneurs and the investment team based in Boston, and really excited to hear your conversation with Rodger Desai.
Thanks, Yonit. I'll ask Rodger to turn on his video as well. I think, there, I see him. Thanks for having me here today. As Yonit and MassChallenge mentioned, I help lead venture investing efforts here at MassMutual Ventures. You know, we have $300 million under management, and we're investing in FinTech and enterprise software companies and really leveraging the strength and distribution of our parent company, which is a Fortune 100 financial services firm providing insurance, asset management, and retirement services since 1851. So pleased to introduce you to, a special portfolio company of ours who has Payfone.com and Rodger Desai, who's the founder and CEO, is strength in their security and authentication services across healthcare, banking, and in insurance companies. So I'll pause there and turn it over to Rodger. And Rodger, if you could, just briefly walk us through your background and the founding story of Payfone, it'll help kick off the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I coming through okay, Chuck?
Great, perfect. Beautiful skyline in the background too.
It's actually not that different from my actual view, which is, well, no, a lot worse. But, well, thank you so much for this opportunity to talk a bit about Payfone and what we're doing in the market. So we started Payfone because, as I think we all know as consumers, when you use digital services, whether that's accessing your bank or a merchant on your phone, on your PC, the experience is often pretty clunky. Sometimes it takes a long time just to do a basic task. And that's mainly because most digital businesses are trying to balance security, convenience, and now privacy all at the same time. And there's usually a trade-off that you can make something very convenient, but then it's not secure. Our view was that there's already an industry that solved this problem very elegantly, and that's your phone. So if you think about like how easy it is to make a phone call, it's so easy we kind of take it for granted. But it's pretty amazing that you can take your phone anywhere in the world. You know, I have Verizon. There's no Verizon outside the U.S., but I can take my phone anywhere in the world, and you know, I can make a call without having to fill out a form or to identify who I am. And that experience will be very convenient, secure, and private all at the same time. So we want to kind of bring the goodness out of the phone world and bring it to the web. So a simple example of what Payfone does is if you were to, let's say, download the Bank of America app, let's say I download the Bank of America app on my phone and I log into Chuck's account. Without Payfone, the bank would say, well, that's interesting. You know, maybe Chuck has a new phone. People get new phones all the time. And so they'll say, hey, Chuck, we're not really sure this is you. So can you answer these questions? Or we're going to send you a text message to reply to. With Payfone, behind the scenes, we essentially help them understand whose phone this is. So it's Chuck's account at the bank, but it's some guy named Rodger's phone. And maybe that's okay. Maybe, you know, we're related or something, but that deserves more inspection. Most of the time, things tie out. It'll be Chuck's account at the bank or insurance company or healthcare provider and Chuck's phone. That way, behind the scenes, identity can play a role in kind of tying out whether you should create a great experience, kind of like TSA PreCheck, for those who remember that, or something where you have more scrutiny. Now, we actually don't use personal data, so we use some fancy stuff with encryption and identity tokens. But the point being that every time we interact with businesses online, it would be great if we had a great experience because the balance of security, convenience, and data privacy were all kind of taken care of on our behalf. Last year, we did about 20 billion authentications. Today, we serve about 500 US banks, including 7 in the top 10, but also healthcare and insurance.
That's great. And you know, I would say I know you guys grew quite quickly through Q1. You know, what changed, you know, through the COVID era of kind of the physical world being locked down to really, you know, what themes, you know, drove that growth this year?
Yeah, you know, in general, there's this shift from kind of, you know, brick and mortar and offline and real world to digital. And I think COVID just accelerated that. You know, obviously when bank branches are closed or people fear going to them, suddenly people discover, oh, I can deposit a check through my phone and I have to go to the bank. Or, you know, I can do most everything I did in a branch kind of on my phone. So I think just the acceleration of that was pretty amazing. Last year, there was about 80 million checking accounts open in the U.S. in branches. So you can imagine, like, you know, where do those people this year go? And it's all happening on the phone. So I think what's now starting to happen is that for every industry, you know, kind of how digital the business is going to govern their market share. So, and we all talk about it. We all talk about, you know, banks that are easy to work with online and on your mobile phone versus those that are difficult. So I think just this kind of huge shift to doing everything remotely, digitally, because of COVID. Suddenly, you know, consumer behaviors change more quickly than they would have otherwise.
That's great. And you know, on the flip side, have there been any challenges that Payphone's experienced, you know, through everything going so digital so quickly? You know, any headwinds or things that you've had to overcome?
Yeah, there's a lot because you know, typically businesses are ahead of consumers in trying to get them to do digital things. And I think there's a couple of themes that are challenges. One, obviously the fraudsters are having a field day because suddenly all this disruption means they can kind of find more ways to penetrate. You can imagine, like, you know, pre-COVID, if someone walked over to accounting and said, oh, we switched vendors for paper suppliers. Just so you know, you have to pay this other vendor, you'll see an email. Yeah, that was a physical face-to-face transaction. Now, all of a sudden, that same person in accounting gets a call from what looks like a colleague because the phone number looks like it's the colleague's. And the same message is like, oh, we switched vendors for this need we have. You'll get, you know, the new wiring instructions by email. Well, that phone number that accounting person saw in their home office is actually not their colleague, but it's spoofed, and it's someone, you know, overseas that's pretending to be a colleague. So So the fraudsters have found amazing new opportunity. I think the fraud rates we're going to see are pretty dramatic. The second kind of thing that's happened is, most businesses really don't trust people online. And what I mean by that is there's something we call the trust gap. You're much more likely to get approved as a consumer for nearly any product in person versus, through your PC or phone. So for example, if you went and applied for a store credit card, let's say like a Walmart card, you're probably 2 to 3 times more likely to get approved in person than the same person applying online. And I think, so why is that? Well, the business, when they see you face to face, they look at a plastic driver's license, they're just more trusting of that experience versus like, well, is this really Chuck on the other end? So I think we're dealing with the fact that businesses have to, reshape a lot of their thinking and look at companies like Payfone in terms of the trust we can provide. Like, hey, this is Chuck because it's his phone, and get them educated on that. And then finally, I think the normal way the risk is assessed, like in banking, the FICO score is pretty important. Well, when millions of people don't have a job, and suddenly I think some of the old measures of how to price risk are suddenly changing pretty dramatically, and I think that's been a challenge. So I think there's huge opportunity, but businesses have to do a lot to take advantage of that.
Makes sense. And so changing topics. As an investor, we're really proud of you guys. But I would say last month you raised $100 million from Apex Digital. Where are you going to deploy that capital, and what growth opportunities do you see in the business in the future?
Yeah, as a business, you're always looking at an addressable market and trying to be focused but opportunistic at the same time. One thing that's always been something I'd want to address is that some of the folks we like to make customers that have the most customers themselves are multinational in nature. So if you look at an Apple, an Amazon, a Google, all those folks, when Payfone would go to them and say, hey, look at this amazing stuff we're doing with all the banks, they'd say, well, look, I operate in 20 countries, and if you can't help me in the same way in all 20, then I'm not sure I want your solution just for the US. So one critical thing is we are focused on bringing our platform to 20 countries, and that essentially will be a digital KYC product where, in effect, if you try to open an account, could be with Amazon, could be with a bank in any of those 20 countries, behind the scenes, again, we'll know if who you're asserting to be, like you're saying you're Chuck and you live in India, well, is that phone really owned by Chuck in India? So that kind of simple capability, which we think is really needed, we're going to bring that to lots more countries, and then go after these folks that have business in all these markets, like a Google and an Amazon.
And I saw Google. There's been some speculation that they're going to make an investment in Geo, behind Facebook. Pretty interesting. So we've seen at MassMutual Payfone expand across our organization in a number of use cases. But what are the I think adding some context for the audience here. What are the most prevalent use cases that you're seeing in this world? We talked about onboarding and underwriting, but maybe share a little bit more about the other couple product lines that Payfone has under the hood.
Yeah, I think the central message of Payfone is that the phone number is a pretty powerful proxy for trust. Let me just explain that, and I'll explain some of the solutions. Today in 2020, 50% of 11-year-olds in the U.S. have a phone. I have an 11-year-old and he doesn't have a phone yet, but so it's pretty striking to think that half of his buddies have phones. 95% of 16-year-olds have phones. Your first trade line as an American or consumer may not be until you're 25, like when you enter the banking system. So if you think about it, like if you were to apply to open an account at a MassMutual, at a Fidelity, at a Wells Fargo, and the phone number that you put in isn't at least a few years old, that's very concerning. Like it happens, but it's very unusual. So looking at what we call phone intelligence, well, how long has that phone number been around? And what kind of behavior does it have? Like, does the phone number call people? Does it log into things? Does it look like it's operating in a normal fashion? All that stuff, like the behavior over time, there's a strong correlation to trust. So for example, what the bad guys do is they buy burner phones, or the phone number they're using is 2 days old, or maybe it's a year old, but they don't really use it to do anything. So it doesn't have the normal activity a phone number should have. So that, I think, is a pretty amazing way to look at risk. So again, if we start everywhere from when you're applying to open a new account at a bank, at an insurance company, look at the phone number. What does it tell you? Is a person physically in possession of that phone number? It's one thing to say, I'm Chuck and I know where he lives and I know his SSN, but what if I had to, how much more expensive and harder is it for the fraudster if I have to have physical possession of Chuck's phone while I'm pretending to be him? Then once you create the account, you're going to need to interact with that bank or the counterparty, and that could be logging in, that could be calling their call center, that could be resetting your password. All those servicing touch points are very cumbersome today. It's not unusual for you to have to answer questions about where you used to live and your favorite color and kind of the questions we all have to in 2020 answer that don't make a whole lot of sense from a security standpoint. So what Payfone does is allows folks to easily assess risk at account opening, easily assess risk when people come back for servicing, and to make it kind of more and more TSA PreCheck like, so the security is kind of melted behind the scenes. So we have solutions for mobile login on a phone. We have a pre-fill solution that if you wanted to apply for a credit card, you can just put in your phone number and we'll pre-fill your name and address and all those things to make it easy. We'll make it so that when you call a call center, there's no questions that are asked of you to prove your identity. You get right to business. So pretty much everything that in digital, I think the phone number can have a huge impact.
That's great. So I have one more question, Rodger. I think we have about 5 minutes left, and then I'll ask the audience if there's any questions through the chat function of Zoom. But we talked earlier this week about hiring for Payfone. I know you guys are about 110 employees, headquartered in downtown Manhattan. But how do you think about culture and I would say managing or acquiring talent remotely given the current environment? And maybe share about any of the open positions you're looking to hire if there's opportunities in the audience.
Yeah, I mean, look, we are looking for great talent. I think we have to hire about 50 folks by the end of the year. So we have opportunities from product management to sales to business development. To me, like a lot of what we do is serving the next generation of consumers. Folks that are, like if you just open your first bank account and you're 25, you have potentially 50 years of lifetime value available to the banking world. So we're looking for people that want to essentially reinvent the internet around identity and make it safer and easier and more private. And so, the more passionate people are about those things and helping us to reweave the web around identity, we would love to talk to everyone. I think in the era of COVID, it is much more challenging. We're now hiring people that we've never actually met in person. In fact, even with this fundraising with Apex, we only met them once in person. Everything else was done by Zoom. I think it just illustrates that you're going to look for people that can communicate effectively, that more so than you would otherwise. When you're talking to someone on the phone or through video, if you can't get your idea across in an efficient manner, that's something that's much more focused on now than it was before. When you're face to face with someone, there's a lot more time, a lot more forgiveness on communicating poorly or ineffectively. So we're really, what that translates into is we make people send in writing assessments, or at least we'd like to see their writing assessments. We'd like them to present to us. So in Zoom, a salesperson will present to us so we know how to present to our clients. So more of that is pretty vital in the hiring process now. Great.
And I'd say on that topic, we have one question from Leah Zuckerman. You've talked a lot about trust, Rodger. What has most surprised you about consumer attitudes towards trust in starting Payfone?
Well, there's this adage that people will give you their social for free shipping, which I think is a pretty good one. there's the dynamics at play around convenience, security, and privacy are the interests aren't all aligned. Everyone kind of, if you're a marketer, you're going to care more about convenience. If you're, the InfoSec guy, it's security. If you're, folks that are worried about mass surveillance, and cell phones can be used in very bad ways to surveil people, and it could affect elections and, all sorts of things. So, I think the interplay of all those things is hard to manage and harmonize. So I guess that the maybe surprising thing at first is that, consumers really don't care about privacy. I think even with all the things that you could say social networks have failed at from a privacy standpoint and a data collection and selling standpoint, it really hasn't slowed those companies down at all. So what you have to do in our case is have a bill of rights, that we have a set of rights that consumers have, whether they want them or not, in terms of how their data is used, stored, like we don't store any personal data. So I was maybe surprised that there's so little, concern for privacy. Like I would say convenience is 100 times more important than privacy, but it doesn't mean a company like Payfone should operate that way.
That's great. Well, I think that wraps up our session. I wanted to, thank the MassChallenge team. Rodger, thank you for joining. Really appreciate you sharing your perspective, and congratulations on the financing. Again, my name's Chuck. I'm, help lead investing for MassMutual Ventures. We're investing across North America, Europe, and Israel. So if you know any great startups who are looking for funding, or we're writing $3 to $10 million checks and focus on companies in the FinTech and broader enterprise software space. But at this time, I'm actually passing it on to Devin Sherman, who's the managing director of the FinTech program here in Boston for MassChallenge. So thanks again. Hope everyone's families are safe. I know it's crazy times, but it's nice to be able to interact digitally over Zoom. So thank you all.
Thank you, Chuck and Rodger, for a very insightful discussion. And congrats on Payfone's recent growth. It really demonstrates how COVID has created both challenges and opportunities for our startup community, and in particular as it relates to trust and communication. Hi everyone, I'm Devin Sherman, and I'm the MD of MassChallenge FinTech, a program within the MassChallenge family that drives intentional partnerships between FinTech startups and large enterprises in asset management, insurance, and banking. As we can see from Chuck and Rodger's chat, it's an extremely exciting time for FinTech. And since the rise of modern FinTech 10 to 15 years ago, we increasingly see FinTech intersecting with other industries outside of traditional financial services, from education to transportation. So next up, we have a panel that will explore one of the most important and timely intersections, which is the fusion between health and wealth. This panel will be moderated by our partner, Mike DeAngelis, who is the Director of Corporate Development at Fidelity Investments. Mike will be joined by our partner, Jacqueline Baker, who's the VP of Startup Programming at AARP Innovation Labs, as well as our alumni startups, Heather Holmes, the CEO and founder of Genivity, and Cody Barbo, the CEO and founder of Trustamol. And also, just quick reminder to everyone to type any questions in the Q&A features on Zoom. We really want this to be as interactive as possible, so please fire away. All right, I'll pass it over to Mike now. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Devin. Thanks to MassChallenge for having us. I'm excited to be here, sitting here at home. But this is an awesome group. Fidelity's been a longtime supporter of MassChallenge, and very fortunate to get to oversee the relationship with MassChallenge. Again, I represent our corporate development group, which is the arm of Fidelity that supports all of our business units and helps look at potential partnerships, investments, and acquisitions in firms at various stages of maturity and size for both inorganic and organic growth opportunities for the firm. I've had the extreme pleasure of working with these three friends, partners, colleagues, very closely, both through MassChallenge and outside of MassChallenge. And I think we're, again, really excited to talk through a little bit about where we're at when we think about the post-COVID world and the current COVID world, and where we'll find ourselves at this intersection of health and wealth. So again, we'll touch on a little bit about the current state, some of the expected and unexpected opportunities and outcomes that have come out of the last 6 months and more ahead, and then the path forward. So I would love to have each of the panelists do a little intro and really think about this idea of the passionate time in the world that we're in, right? People all around the world are finding passion in places they haven't before. And I'll ask everybody as they introduce themselves, starting with Jacqueline, share a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you're building at AARP, and then why you do what you do.
Sure. Hello, everyone. Jacqueline and Baker here. I serve as the Vice President of Startup Programming within AARP Innovation Labs. Thank you for convening this body of conversation at just the right time. So I, in my role, have a unique and humbling opportunity, honestly, to find some of the best and brightest startups all across the world that ladder up to our overall mission. At AARP, our mission is to empower people to choose to live how they want as they age. Within AARP Innovation Labs, we're simply just doing that using disruptive innovation. And so I'm always on the hunt, whether it be through dynamic collaborators like MassChallenge or with the production of pitch competitions everywhere from CES to health, and finding some of the best and brightest startups that ladder up in the areas of health tech and fintech. I've been delighted in not necessarily the most pleasant way, right? But when you see a problem and then the perfect alignment of things that happen in the world, whether good or bad, provide opportunities to find solutions to that problem, it's inspiring, right? So we've known for years, and I'm sure lots of people on this particular forum know that there is a deep intersection between health tech and fintech. And so right now there's been an abundance of resources and an abundance of conversations on how do we solve for that. And so at this stage in my career, what's exciting is not only continuing to build a robust ecosystem within AARP Innovation Labs for startups to be discovered and to grow and thrive and scale, but to also tackle this massive issues that are rooted in the areas of health tech and fintech. So that's what I'm working on right now.
Thank you, Jacqueline. Heather, why don't you take us next?
Sure. Hi, I'm Heather Holmes, the CEO and founder of Genivity. And at Genivity, our mission is to help make sure that everyone's financial future is as healthy as it can be by helping protect you from the biggest risk to your financial well-being, which is health and longevity costs. So we have a technology solution, a SaaS platform that is used by financial professionals to help their clients plan and address these key issues that can be so disruptive to their financial goals.
Thanks, Heather. And Cody?
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. And quick shout out to all the Israel attendees. I spent my summer after college there, and it was an awesome time, and I miss the country dearly. I am the co-founder and CEO of Trustamol. We are building a modern estate planning platform for the 150 million Americans that don't have an estate plan. So if you're familiar with TurboTax, it's very much like TurboTax for setting up your Trustamol online. I've been an entrepreneur for the last decade. It's my third company. And as I was getting married, I realized that this was an incredibly expensive and time-consuming process. So we really wanted to streamline it for a lot of families out there to make this a more pleasant and approachable experience. And since we started the business, we've raised $8 million in venture capital. We have over 110,000 members that have used our estate planning products. And we've been very fortunate to partner with some amazing organizations, including Fidelity and AARP, as we went through the MassChallenge program, and just graduated, and proud to be an alumni of MassChallenge FinTech.
Thanks, Cody. So as the alumni and just where we ended last, we'll kick off into this idea of where we're at right now. And I think let's take a more positive spin and an optimistic look into what we had all talked about as kind of the thesis around the current state of the pandemic, right? So from your perspective and Trust and Will's perspective, where do you stand?
I'll kick it off. Okay. We saw the pandemic have a huge impact on our business in a positive way. As soon as the pandemic started to unfold in the United States about mid-March, we saw almost a direct correlation to the number of site traffic visits going up, the number of registrations going up. We had press opportunities come up left and right, people that wanted to know, is it safe to do an online estate plan? Where do you go to do an online estate plan? What is an estate plan? As many people were doing this for the first time and felt a real urgency to get it done. And the alternative, which is normally to do it with an attorney in person, just didn't match up considering the social distancing requirements, and not just on the creation of the estate plan, but even on the execution. So we've done a really streamlined process of making it as pleasant of an experience as possible. Some of the things that we took immediate action on, I guess, is our proudest initiative with the COVID response was our healthcare initiative. So in the United States, we have healthcare professionals, millions and millions of them, fighting the front lines, helping patients basically survive. And we offered a free estate plan to them to take advantage of the times that we're in. We had over 10,000 estate plans given away for free to healthcare professionals. And that's an offer that we're still running, especially as cases start to spike up again. The reason for this, my wife works in the hospital. Many of the members of the team's family members work in the hospital. And it's kind of on you as a founder to do something or to just sit and watch from the sidelines. So we decided to take action as a team.
Awesome. Heather, what about you and the team at Genivity?
Yeah, so I mean, first off, we've been a virtual first team for a while. So we believe in office interaction is important, but we had always built our team that way. So really making that change wasn't as complex for us as maybe it has been for some others, except for the fact that now there tends to be other family members around at home. But from a company perspective, and what we saw with our customers is that this just put a big spotlight on why the intersection between health and wealth are just so connected together, and you can't think about one without the other. So we've seen a real increase in our customers' clients being concerned about how to make sure that they have taken the proactive steps to make sure that they won't be a burden on any loved ones if a crisis like this impacts them. So some of the things that we've tried to do for our customers has really been focusing on the research that we can provide. So we've done some early research with the AARP. We're launching today actually a nationwide research project looking at some of the behavior trends that have been impacting Americans as part of COVID when they think about their health and planning for their wealth. And then we've really focused on what are some of the resources and materials we can provide to our financial advisor customers that can really help them answer these questions and reach a broader audience who have been, really concerned about making sure that they are still going to be okay and on track. So those are some of the initiatives that we've really been focusing on helping people do.
And one quick follow-up there, Heather, just because you were building this company long before COVID became a thing that was top of mind. Can you give some background into why and how you were ahead of the curve?
Yeah, so our team's a mix of healthcare and financial services professionals. I'm one of the healthcare people, and when I was working in the healthcare space and I worked in market development, one of the things that always shocked me was how oftentimes people would delay care because they were afraid of costs, not understanding that delaying choices in preventative care can be way more expensive down the road. So I knew from being in healthcare we could do these risk predictions, but what the light bulb was can we also bring in the financial impact? And I think that's exactly what we're seeing today, where people have been afraid to go to their doctors for preventive care because they're afraid of COVID. For example, my aunt fell off a ladder, broke her wrist, and never went to the hospital for the past 3 months because she was afraid. So I think we're going to see a huge increase in that. And obviously there's been a delay in how people have been thinking about getting their preventative care and where will that spending be later. But like I said, the two go hand in hand together, and with the market fluctuation early on, it just also increased those fears.
Yeah, thanks. All right, Jacqueline, I'm going to give you the next two here and to tie us into our second part around what we can change, right, in some of the broader trends that especially AARP sees, right, on behalf of 38 million customers, which is incredible, right? But I guess before we jump into that, do you have anything else on, and again, where we're at right now, the current optimistic view about the pandemic and its impact on life and business?
Yeah, absolutely. I'll say one of the things that we did have a unique opportunity to do at the onset of the pandemic was to erect a site called what we call AARP Community Connections. And I know that Genivity and Trustamol, who we had the opportunity to work with over the past 6 months, are listed there. And so particularly Trustamol. And it truly, what it allows is the opportunity to get services, care, products at the local level, right? Because one thing that we quickly determined as a result of this pandemic is there may not be like this big grand umbrella of a savior coming down to get us. Like we probably have to organize in our spaces around us. And AARP Community Connections was truly an opportunity to figure out like what's going on around me and how can I get together with the people that are immediately in my space or the people that are immediately around me, and to find the opportunity to get together and solve. And so that was one of the biggest things that we were able to erect. But outside of just general services of things that people may need, the other thing we were able to do, which I'm particularly proud of because it moved a lot quicker than I think what would happen in regular times, is to actually provide a place for startups to then be listed publicly in a forum with AARP on a site, right? Sometimes those types of things, can take forever, but when we're trying to solve for something fairly quickly, we can cut through some red tape. And I think that overall has been something that has been a pretty unique outcome, in that a lot of the red tape that exists in organizations, we've been able to either put up a lot thinner tape, right, so that we can get to solutions quicker, or just remove the tape altogether and say, hey, we're looking to solve something big here. We don't have time to go through steps 1 through 20. Like, how can we get this done in steps 1 through 4 or 1 through 2? And so that's been, I think, one of the biggest things that I've seen. Unfortunately, because of a tragedy, we've been able to put some things in place that I think will actually stay, some things that will stick. So that I believe that answers that first question of just some quick wins, if you will. Mike.
Yeah. And on that, Heather quickly gave us a sneak peek into the research that'll be released, which personally can't wait to read, because I know based on the work that you and the team at AARP do, it's going to be impactful, right? But can you give us any sneak peeks into what we learned around behavior, what we observed at large that might be a teaser for people to get the report later and read it?
I'm not going to steal Heather's thunder. Are you trying to get me in trouble here? What are you doing? You see this, Heather? It's not out yet, and I absolutely will not steal Heather's thunder. I'm going to take her Leo on that. Yeah, and I'll leave that there, Mike. You're trying to trick me.
Love it. A good partner. That was a test. So let's jump quickly into this idea of right, like through the lens that AARP has, which again is probably one of the most powerful in terms of its connection to consumers across America and more broadly across the world, right? Like when you think about the current trends that we've started to unpack a little bit here, what have we learned about the consumers and our ability to meet consumers where they are, right? We talked a lot about, and I know you and I share a passion around the accessibility and democratization of things that masses have become accustomed to, and there are large portions of the population globally who don't have access to basic things like we do. So I just give me some insight where your head goes there and how we unpack that a little.
Yeah, my head goes to two different places here. It not only goes to the place of some of the assumptions that we have, right, about the general public or people who are aging, and how a lot of those things have been debunked even further. But then also, my mind also goes to trends as it relates to the startups, and I'll get to that in just a second. So from an assumption standpoint, like even with years of research and technology reports that we produce pretty frequently. I mean, a huge report that we produced and released at CES earlier this year around the 50 plus and tech trends. We know that the adoption as it relates to people 50 plus in technology actually is pretty high, right? We just make some assumptions that if you're of a certain age that you're not going to use technology, or you're going to be slow to come to the table. And by force, right, this time we've had to make an assumption that people of a certain age do like technology because they need it to survive, because they need it to get essential services, because they need it to get information, to be connected, etc. And I do think that on the other side of this, right, hopefully sooner than later, those assumptions that we have around people who are aging and believing that we shouldn't build for them, or we shouldn't get insight and input from people as we're developing things, I think those things will be extinguished a bit. I certainly hope that they'll be extinguished a bit. So that's the initial thing. The other place that my mind goes, Mike, is trends with startups, right? And I always say that I greatly enjoy my job. I'm humbled to have this job. But one of the hardest parts of this job, honestly, and anyone I think that works in the innovation space, is the fact that you have to say no, right? You have to say no a lot, because you see a lot of great technologies and innovation being presented, but if they don't ladder up to what you're focused on, you know, it just doesn't make sense for you. But I will say that, and my answers here are going to ladder the line of both health tech and fintech because they have a bit of an intersection. But there have been a lot more companies that pitch to me and send proposals to me and want to talk to me about their particular product, services, innovations in a few key areas. And I've seen an uptick in this over the last few months. The first one, which I think isn't a surprise to many people, is in-home monitoring, right? And it's because you're home more, right? So of course you're gonna want to know what's happening with your mom, what's happening with your dad, et cetera. So that's always on the uptick in terms of companies that present, but even more so. The other one is data, right? Health data, not only being able to continue to own your own health data, but also trying to figure out, like, how do I monetize my health data, which I know several companies we've had relationships with on the fintech side, you know, they're looking to solve for that. So that's been on a huge uptick as well. The other one is health tracking, because if you think about it, what's happening right now is that people, out of fear of COVID, out of fear of, you know, just trying to escape being impacted by the pandemic, are not getting essential things done. And so imagine if you needed to get that test done or needed to go out to see, you know, whatever service provider, you're putting that off to 2021, and that's creating a much bigger issue. And so some people, some startups who, you know, I think are being innovative about this are figuring out, like, how do I activate ways at home for people to still track certain things in the comfort and compounds of their home, so that when 2021 comes, it's not a complete derailing of everything that they had been on track for. The last one, which is a really, really important one, is the social determinants of health, right? The whole concept around where I live, where my zip code is, will dictate my longevity. It'll dictate how long I live, right? How long I have to spend time with my loved ones. And that has, although it has not been a secret, right, that is an issue, and it's been an issue for decades, this particular time in our life has shined a very bright light on that, and helping people to understand that, you know, if you live in certain zip codes, there are certain accesses to health-related services and, of course, fintech-related services that may not exist for you. And so those have been, you know, a few of the key things that we've seen uptick, particularly over the last several months. And that last one, social determinants of health, continues to be something that we're working on and are looking to attract companies who are working on that as well.
I think we're done. I think we can go home. On a side note, I will say, on a side note, AARP, for everybody, if you do go to CES, I highly recommend going to Jacqueline and team's booth. It puts booths traditionally to shame. It's more like a home or a small city. I don't know what you and Andy have planned next year, but always impressive. And I think we've also picked our next topic maybe as a follow-up around data, because we could spend a lot of time, and I would love years talking about that. But staying focused, Heather, I'm going to bring it back to you. Again, Jacqueline just gave us probably the best overview of current trends that we think about, and we think about changing, and we think about actually being able to accomplish as entrepreneurs and incumbents, and everybody's role in this change that's happening. When you think about, for Genivity and yourself as a founder, what are some of the unexpected opportunities that have arisen? And when you think about, like, you know, as putting my entrepreneur hat on, right? Like, you have only so much time in a day, right? And I think many of us came into this year with a plan to execute on a very clear vision with the capital we had raised, right, to deliver on XYZ. Has that, like, do you think about the current state of Genivity and moving forward in, like, a pre-COVID, post-COVID mindset? As a lot of, like, opportunities that have come up over the last couple of months have redefined the direction you go as a firm? Hey, you're muted.
Yeah, I would say,
there we go.
Thank you, Zoom, for the little prompt. I would say because we are sitting at this nexus between health and wealth, the path that we are on continues. What this has done is it's challenged us to think about ways that, our mission is to help make sure nobody runs out of money in retirement due to their biggest risk, which is health. So, we work currently with financial planners, and so they're typically of a certain net worth. Part of the work that we've been doing, is we've been learning with the AARP is how do we think about ways to expand that to be able to service, kind of a broader population of people. So we've been looking at some really interesting ways that can help people understand how to make better decisions around, let's say, for example, HSAs, and is that the right advantage for them to offset medical costs today or be able to invest and save for the future. So that's just kind of accelerated the path that we've been going along there. Another area that's been really of interest for us has really been around early retirees, as more people have been, looking at different packages from their companies to leave earlier. We know that that can be a really complicated decision, and making healthcare choices is a very expensive one out of that. So for those areas, these were areas we were already interested in, but what it did was it just kind of brought those areas more to the forefront. And then a lot of our time and research has been spent looking at how can we help our customers today, the advisors, really evangelize this message out there even more, since we know that this is so top of mind for Americans everywhere, and really globally as well.
Yeah. So quickly, before I give it to Cody, Jacqueline and I would say that we continue to be better at working with firms like Genivity and Trust and Will, and bringing outside-in innovation into our core, right, in our DNA. Have you seen a change, and you can be honest as a group of friends, that we have gotten better, that the broader, looking at the group of customers you serve more broadly, have you seen the change on the side of the partners who help bring Genivity to customers?
Well, first off, we've really appreciated the opportunity that we've had through MassChallenge to work with both Fidelity and the AARP. And working with you, Michael, has obviously been really impactful to what we do. And it was great to be able to come out of this program with a partnership with Fidelity, with kind of their direct-to-advisor services. So that was one of the great accomplishments. And because Fidelity is so vast, there's obviously multiple places where we feel there's a good fit as we continue to expand this relationship. And then the AARP, just really opened up their doors and treated us treated us and kind of became like part of our company, and it really helped us with looking not only at researching our current customers, but in the market, and then better understanding consumers. And we're continuing that evolution on our product with the AARP. And I think that's just been incredibly helpful, because these are areas that we really wanted to focus on and learn more. But as a startup, and even at the phase where we're at, you still have limited time and resources. So to be able to tap into experts who are so good and know what they do and help you just shorten the time to figure things out, it's been incredible. So thank you both.
Thanks. Well, plug for Jacqueline and I. Ching. We did not want you to do that. We were hoping that you'd, but thank you. And again, plug for MassChallenge, because it did drive a lot of the, I think it is one of the reasons we're all here, right? Cody, so you're going to take us home. We are almost out of time, which I knew this was going to happen. So, traditional spiel, got to shorten it down for me here, my friend. Talk to us about the path forward for Trust and Will. End us on this positive note of some of the unexpected opportunities and how Trust and Will has adapted. And
yeah, so game plan since the beginning has been the same. We want to be the category leading brand in the United States for online estate planning, and have every family in this country have an estate plan, whether they're just starting their family or they're taking care of their family later in life. I think the biggest wake up to what we've seen as an outcome of the pandemic is just the acceleration of tech enablement for seniors, whereas before I think they had a tarnished reputation around being able to use technology, which I don't think was ever the case. If I can get my 88-year-old grandmother to use Zoom, I think anybody can use tech now at this point. And the reality is that you'll see continued interest in the venture community, as well as more startups that focus specifically on FinTech for seniors or healthcare for seniors, with technology being at the core. And for us, that's a third of our traffic is 65 plus. You have 10,000 people a day hitting that age. That number will hit 12,000 over the next decade. And in our case, you have half of seniors without an estate plan. So it's incredibly important for us to educate them first and foremost, to then build that trust that you can do this safely and securely online. And for many of them, they're a caregiver to a potential parent still. So we want to make sure that they are setting up their own parents for success as they plan for their fourth season of life as well. And the big thing with our industry and estate planning is that even though our product is online, most states still require paper documents that you have to use a pen, get a real notary to come and witness and have witnesses watch you sign the documents. And we've been pretty innovative on the regulatory side. Last year, we did the first electronic will in the United States in history. We're bringing that to more states this year and beyond. But what the pandemic did is it only validated the need that because the technology exists for digital signatures, digital notary, and digital storage of documents, that it'll only accelerate more states to adopt this changing legislation or regulatory environment. And that's something that we're pushing as a company, along with several other great organizations. And that's what I'm going to see as a really positive outcome from the pandemic and trust in the states industry.
Well, I hate to end our fun. This has been the bright spot of the week so far, and I'm sure I speak on behalf of Jacqueline, Heather, Cody. Thank you to MassChallenge for bringing us all together again. I think you probably picked up. We can talk forever about anything. So it was good to keep us online. I'm going to pass it over back to Yonit and the team at MassChallenge.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you, Heather, Jacqueline, Cody, for sharing your perspective on how FinTech and health have intersected and created new opportunities and perhaps other challenges. Really excited to hear about you and your work. You guys both referenced the partnerships that MassChallenge is able to cultivate between enterprises and startups. And I think one of the other really exciting things that MassChallenge does is actually give us, excuse me, a global perspective on what's going on in an industry. Losing my voice there. So I'm really excited to introduce Itamar Jobani, who's the founder of PayEm and a MassChallenge alum. Itamar is joining me here in Israel. Tell us a little bit about PayEm and about yourself.
Sure. Well, thank you for having me. PayEm is a corporate card spend management solution. So we started PayEm about 1.5 years ago when I was working as a developer at a startup company in Israel. And we realized, the dev team realized that we had our cloud services running on extra servers. And we realized that a few months later through a billing that was really, really high. And that sort of like opened up the question of like how credit cards run in big organizations. And we found out that credit card in organizations are sort of like a black box. It's very hard to understand what's going on there. It's very hard to control what's going on there. And I had a few talks with friends and colleagues in the industry, and we decided to start PayEm. So I shifted from a developer, and we've been kindly hosted by the Visa Innovation Studio here in Tel Aviv for over 1 year. We built a partnership with Visa, and through that, a partnership with Salem Bank in Columbus, Ohio. And a few months ago, just when COVID hit, we launched our credit card platform, which was a big milestone for us to have our name on a Visa card. And now we start serving customers in Israel and the United States.
So you're working directly with enterprises who I think during this COVID period are themselves having a lot of questions about what their future looks like, whether it's their future spend or their future management of budget. And you yourselves are a startup that has raised capital and is building its capacity during this time. What are some of the challenges that were posed to your company because of COVID and during this challenging time?
Yeah, I think in the immediate term, I was in San Francisco for about half a year now. And when COVID hit, we sort of like lost contact with all of our key partners and key customers. And that was very frustrating because we just went live and we were really eager to work on our product. And we realized that most CFOs and controllers in the companies that we were talking to are very busy restructuring their companies, applying to federal loans and so on. But then, you know, after the initial shock passed, we found that we built a very instrumental tool for them to have a granular control over the spend, and that was exactly what they wanted at that point. So they wanted to make sure that every dollar spent is actually a dollar that needs to be spent. And when they had legacy products or legacy corporate card, it was very hard to understand what's going on there.
So how did you manage sort of the management of your team? I know, as you mentioned, that you were in San Francisco for about 6 months. You've recently come out of quarantine here in Israel. So how does it work as a CEO of a company that straddles both sides of the Atlantic, with customers on both sides of the Atlantic, having to deal with some of the travel restrictions that have become a reality for all of us today?
Yeah, I think we luckily in an era where it's very easy to work remotely. It did mean a less sleep for me. So, you know, San Francisco and Israel is really hard time gap. We found out that we can do a daily work of like about maybe an hour, me and the dev team, during the mornings and during late night. But we also found out a lot of different tools. So we use a platform for video letters. So allow me to point things on my screen and send instead of like typing an email that is very detailed and taking a screenshot and so on. And we actually have a few team member in Boston, and we start using that even before the video letter, even before, because working remotely was kind of hard. So when COVID hit, we were sort of ready for working remotely.
Now, we heard just earlier about the way that startups and enterprises are working, and when you have an existing relationship, perhaps it continues to be improved by even during this COVID crisis. For you as an early stage company who's building out that enterprise network and building out those customers, how's customer acquisition going these days? How are you able to connect with those potential clients?
You know, I think it's very easy today to get somebody on a Zoom call, and I think on my side, it's actually making things a little bit more efficient. So I can compress more meetings in a day and meet more clients that if I have to actually go to their office and meet them, it will be extremely hard. We found out that I think once there is a fit and you get into, you say to a customer, you know, can we hop on a 20 minutes call? We just want to get feedback. We're building a product that is, you are sort of the stakeholder that we're building for. We just want to hear your opinion. And then in that 20 minutes, they are like, wow, this is super interesting. Let's get another meeting where I can actually see the product and then it's sort of run. So we had a very organic acquisition so far. It started with me even posting a help question in Facebook, and through that we got to Fiverr, or we got to very large companies. So it's amazing. I think also this may be an testament for Israeli startup culture, where people really want to help. So they're very open to help a young startup, and if they see that it's a good solution to a pain, they're less concerned if you're like a huge corporation already, or if you just built a very smart product.
That's great. So what's next for the company? What's next for PayEm? Since we are serving, the Israeli and the U.S. corporation, we very quickly realized that one of the unique point that we want to head with is building a multinational operation. So to allow companies that have offices in the US, in Europe, Israel, and Asia to have one platform to manage all of their corporate card spend. So now we're building the multi-currency multinational infrastructure for that. So it's sort of like working in a more of like a beta stage. We're also integrating now an Apple Pay and mobile pay solution, which become really relevant in today's atmosphere. And we're also hiring. So we're hiring sales and devs, and we're building a sales pipeline because we feel that we're in a point where we're scaling up our growth. Itamar, thank you so much for sharing this. It certainly seems like in a world that imagines a decentralized workforce where we have decision makers that are physically spread apart and may not be able to run across one another at the proverbial water cooler in the controller's office, there's an even greater need that PayEm fills. So thank you so much for sharing that and for being here with us. I'm going to throw it over to Devin to close us out.
Thank you so much, Yonit and Itamar, and to all our speakers today. And thank you everyone for joining us as well. Really interesting and timely discussions all around. We heard from Rodger and Chuck how COVID has made the importance of privacy in addition to convenience even more pronounced. And as Rodger said, how the phone number is increasingly seen as a proxy for privacy. And with Mike, Jacqueline, Heather, and Cody, we dove into the growing understanding that our financial wellness is a critical aspect of our overall wellness and how tech is making financial resources more accessible and easier to use. However, we have a long way to go here and we need to act together because, as Jacqueline noted, social determinants like zip codes still very much dictate how much access people have to these critical resources. And we had a really engaging discussion with Yonit and Itamar, providing some great food for thought in terms of how to work productively and meaningfully engage customers as an early stage startup in a largely remote world. So again, thank you everyone, really appreciate your time. And I'll turn it back over to Yonit to share details about our next MassChallenge event.
Thanks, Devin. This has really been an exciting series of conversations, and it's one that we're continuing. MassChallenge has been bringing together thought leaders and startups across a myriad of events, activities, and engagements, because we recognize that despite the fact we might not physically be in the same room, our ability to connect is today more important than ever before. So we have some upcoming events we'd love to share with you. The first is the first ever MassChallenge US Virtual Startup Showcase. Over 200 companies from across the US who are going to be featured as part of that on July 16th and 17th. You can find more information on our website for that. We're also going to be holding a Future of InsurTech Demo Day, which Devin's team is leading on July 20th and through the 22nd, where you'll get to see how FinTech startups are solving meaningful challenges presented by the InsurTech industry. And then finally, we're going to have our next installment of the MassChallenge Innovation Summit series, looking at the future of sports on July 28th. So as you get ready for the court or the baseball diamond, please do join us to think about how it is that professional sports around the world are going to be engaging with their customers and with media over the course of this new and very different period. Thank you all for being here and for joining us and for being part of this conversation.